Hi, everyone. This is the Google for Education team. We're excited to be on today with you. We'll be starting in just a few moments, but I will flash up the registration link. If you are waiting and haven't registered yet, please do register here. So the power of Hangouts, here is the registration link. We'll be beginning in about 3 minutes. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining at the top of the hour, we'll be starting in about 2 minutes. If you haven't registered yet, we've flashed up a link onto the screen. Please do check in. It is case sensitive, goo.gl/HHVE4 capital K. We'll be beginning in about 2 minutes. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen on the education team. I'm joined today by a couple of other folks. I'll actually let them introduce themselves really quickly. I believe you both are on not on mute, so feel free to say your name and what you do.
I'm Lori White. I'm in Cloud Developer Relations, and I work with Google.
And Dan?
Hey, I'm Dan Cole. I'm a sysadmin in the CS department at Columbia University. I'm also a student at Columbia University.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan, for joining, and Lori. We're excited today that all of you are here to chat a little bit about the Google Education Grants Program, which we launched last fall, and we've expanded this spring. So as we talked about in the invitation, and just to recap, that we will spend about 10 minutes going overview of the Google Cloud Platform and getting started, which includes how to apply and set up your EDU grants. We'll spend the bulk of our time talking about using GCP in your classes, and that's where Dan's going to pop in and tell us a little bit about what they've learned at Columbia and how they've been applying the grants. And then we'll spend a few minutes talking about getting more out of GCP in terms of GPUs, TPUs, etc. GCP, by the way, is Google Cloud Platform. Sorry for all the acronyms. And in the last 15 minutes, we will do Q&A. So feel free to add your questions to this shared doc, which is case sensitive, goo.gl/capital Y, capital R, lowercase a, capital V, J, S. So with that, and I believe that link is also in the YouTube viewer. So if you don't see it there, if we go too fast for you, feel free to pull that information from the YouTube screen. With that, we'll jump in. We already introduced ourselves, but Stephen, Lori, and Dan here, and we're excited to chat with you today about Google Cloud Platform. You've already checked in. That link is also on YouTube, but this is really important for us. We can make sure to send the materials to those that come. So first, what is Google Cloud Platform and why should I use it? We know there's a lot of clouds out there, so we just wanted to show you a couple of different ways that we think Google Cloud Platform could be helpful in your classroom and across campus. So To back up a little bit, though, the interesting thing is while Google Cloud Platform is relatively new to market, we've actually been using the cloud, and Google for the past 15 years has been developing some of the world's fastest, most powerful, highest quality cloud infrastructure. And so it's the first time that we're now making this infrastructure available to external parties. But you see here Google Search, Gmail, Google Maps, Chrome, Android, YouTube, and Google Play all run on Google's infrastructure. Each of these products, if you are a connoisseur, will know that each of them serves over 1 billion users. So we know a thing or two about how to do fast, scalable, reliable architecture in terms of infrastructure, and we're excited to be able to allow both companies and schools to be able to now access the infrastructure that we've been building to run your workloads. So there are 3 areas that our higher education team at Google is working with universities. First is on teaching. So how are we preparing students for cloud computing in the future? The second is administration. So how are we helping university as they operate as a business think about things like student success and analytics, or even just do backup and disaster recovery? And then the third is research, which is how are we helping researchers use the cloud to answer and solve problems around genomics or solve problems around climate change. And so we're going to be working a lot with researchers as they use those cloud products. But today we're focusing on this teaching component. And that's a program that we've developed called the Google Education Grants Program, where we give faculty in select countries, which I will show you next which ones those include, that are teaching university courses in computer science or related fields access to Google Cloud Platform for free. And that means access to 40 plus, I should say, products. They're generally bucketed. So each hexagon that you see here and different logo is a different product that's part of Google Cloud Platform. They're generally bucketed into 3 areas. First is data and analytics. Second is application development. And third is infrastructure and operations. But this is where you'll see everything from Google Cloud Storage to BigQuery, which allows you to go through terabytes and petabytes of data and analyze them very quickly, and machine learning all fall into these buckets. What I should note as well is that Google actually has been working on some of the leading innovations here. We actually authored a paper on MapReduce back in 2004. And then now we have a product which is called DataProc, which is a managed Hadoop service through Google Cloud Platform. Same thing we mentioned about BigQuery. We actually developed it back in 2008 at Google, and we call it internally Dremel, and are now making it available externally so you can run your petabytes and large amount of data and do analysis on them. Similar to things like Spanner, which is even bigger than BigQuery and empowers things like Google Search. So we're very excited because we've been working on a lot of these developments over the past few years, but now being able to share them with everyone externally has been really exciting. So a few questions that we often hear, well, one is, what is Google Cloud Platform, which you just covered, but then why should we even consider using it? There's lots of products out there. I think one is that I would argue, the leaders in machine learning. You'll see here there are 4 different APIs that we've already developed around translation. This actually powers Google Translate. Vision API, which allows you to look at images and say, this is a rose, or this is what type of flower, or what type of object. If you're using Google Photos, that's a great example. Type in glacier, and it'll pull up all the pictures you've ever taken and find which ones are glaciers, or dog. I tend to use that. Pro tip, I use it for receipts. So I take pictures of all my receipts, and then when I need to do, accounting at the end of the month, I type in Google Photos for receipts. Natural language API, which can take language and be able to parse out sentiment or different analyses. And then speech API, which we use for speech to text, but it allows you then to take the speech and translate it into a text. Be able to then layer on things like natural language API to then analyze it. So definitely a lot of machine learning, and we've heard on campuses that artificial intelligence and machine learning classes are oversubscribed, lots of interest in them. Here are some great tools that you can now use for free in those classes. The second is TPUs, which are TensorFlow processing units. We just announced that we're going to be making these externalizing them later this year. And what's interesting about TPUs is they're a beefed up version of GPUs specifically for machine learning. So they're great for both training and inference of data. And if you look at them, they're about 15 to 30 times faster and 30 times to 80 times faster than a combination of GPUs and CPUs. So what's it really speeds up that machine learning training and inference process. And we're going to be making those available to education later on. The other piece is just our commitment to open source. So if you look at Kubernetes, which is container management, which Google developed, as opposed to taking these really cool idea of how to manage containers and making it our own IP, we actually decided to open source the framework and then allow the community to continue to develop it. So that's created a really rich ecosystem. Same with TensorFlow, where people are looking at machine learning language libraries and being able to build onto that and creating a really nice environment where there's lots of work and innovation happening outside of Google's four walls on containers and machine learning. We also do have products like Cloud ML, which is a managed cloud machine learning, which would be a managed TensorFlow experience. Committed to open source, you'll see here that we have lots of languages, operating systems, developer tools, and data tools to help you get started. So, and also make sure that they interoperate with your other services that you're using. So this is great if you're teaching students lots of different languages or operating systems. Google Cloud Platform fits really nicely into that. So I'll pass it over to Lori to talk a little bit about how to apply and get started.
Okay, so today is the first anniversary of our grants program that had started a year ago today. And not much has changed over that last year. That we asked that professors at regionally accredited schools within the United States and one of 29 other countries apply at cloud.google.com/edu. You'll need to give us your information about the student domain, a little bit about the class, and some way that we can verify that you are in fact a professor. When all of this is entered and we believe that you are a professor, we'll send people in the United States, professors in the United States, 2 different emails. One will have coupon codes for the professor and staff. The other will have coupon codes for the students or a URL for the students in the class, rather than have you go out and have to give the coupons to each student and make sure they only get one and make sure everybody gets one despite who may or may not be there. We'll go through a verification process and they get it directly. In either case, you'll go to console.cloud.google.com/education, and there are links in the emails to enter that coupon code, and you'll receive a billing account that has typically $100 for staff, $50 for students. Don't let the dollar values bother you. That we monitor the usage in your class. When we see that a student is getting over a particular percentage into the term, we'll let you know and offer to send you more. So long as there's valid usage, we're thrilled that you're using it. Typically, we only have about 10% usage on these coupons, so giving you more would just mean that we would be more in the hole and only have 5%. If you're a program within the outside of the United States and one of the 29 other countries, and can we change slides? I can't see the slide deck right now.
Yep, move forward.
Thank you. You'll do the same application, but professors are then responsible for setting up projects for all of the students in their class. We need you to redeem those coupons quickly, and we'll increase the project limit for you, and we have instructions on how to automate this project creation. Next slide, please. You don't need a credit card. Your students don't need a credit card. There is no chance that they are going to overspend and get charged for this. Additionally, they need a Gmail account, but you don't need to be a G Suite for Education school in order to use this program. However, if you are a G Suite for Education school, by default, the Google Developers Console is turned off. If you know your G Suite for Education administrator and can convince them to turn it on, students can go ahead and redeem using their G Suite or school email address. Otherwise, they'll have to use a Gmail address. This comes up about once a week. It's not a major inconvenience for us, but it's frustrating for you. So if you're G Suite, check to see if this is turned on for you first. And now we have a school that is a G Suite for Education school and has actually set up their own organization in order to use this. And Dan's going to tell us about how things work for him at Columbia.
All right. So as I said, my name is Dan Cole. I'm a sysadmin at Columbia University in the computer science department. I'm also a master's student here, and I've also been a teaching assistant for the last 2 years. So I kind of get every aspect of Google Cloud. If you go to the next slide real quick. Just a little bit of an overview on Google Cloud Platform at Columbia. We've been using it for about a year, so we were one of the first universities to start using it last summer. Since then, we've redeemed about 1,800 coupon codes for students, over 50 different courses. Not just the CS department, but the whole School of Engineering has started using Google Cloud. It's been incredibly successful with both the faculty and the students. I just have a quote up. This is actually from one of our faculty members in a computational genomics class. And we were talking to him last summer about possibly using Google Cloud and making it optional for students if they wanted it. And he instead wanted it required for every student. And his view is that, the cloud is the future of computing. This is what students are going to have to do moving forward in their careers. And if they don't, if we don't move forward with it, if we don't provide the opportunity, then we're going to be left behind. So I'm going to give 2 different case studies, 2 different courses that have made use of it, and a little bit about why and how they use it, and then just talk generally about some of our best practices. So we can go to the next slide. The first class I'm going to talk about is our Introduction to Databases class. This is a very popular class, both in computer science and in non-computer science classes. A lot of business majors take it. A lot of humanities people take it. It's just something people feel is very useful. So this is a course that's traditionally used cloud computing. When I took it, we used Microsoft Azure. That was about 2 years ago. And I think previously to that, it used AWS. So it's very easy for the faculty members to translate the course syllabus to Google Cloud. It just, moved from setting up on Azure to setting up on Google Cloud. The benefit for us was it was much easier to distribute the codes to students. Students find it much easier to redeem the codes. The fact that you didn't need a credit card was actually a really big deal. One of our big problems with AWS was the fact that you did need a credit card. And students would inadvertently get charged. They forget to turn off their machines, and then 2 years later, they'd get a $1,000 bill from Amazon. What we really use it for in this class is to provide a standardized platform for all students and a persistent platform for all students. So in the case of this class, students have to set up their own database with a web front end. It has to be left on for a few weeks so the TAs can get to it and grade it. The cloud is just the way to do this, at least the faculty feels. Having one platform that all students have access to and can use, it makes everything easier. If you go to the next slide real quick. So as I said, students find it much easier to use Google Cloud Platform. The setup is easy. The interface is easy. Other than that, once you have something installed, it's pretty much the same. The faculty, as I said, there's a much reduced administrative burden because the setup is easier for the students. And the easier setup means that instructors and TAs spend less time being sysadmins and walking students through setting up their virtual machine and more time explaining how to do a SQL query. So as I said, this class has been using cloud for a while, so they were able to pretty much translate directly into Google. Now that they are comfortable with GCP as a platform, and we're kind of convinced we're going to be sticking with it, they're looking into using some of the extra features that Google provides. And I think this is actually really exciting, and this is kind of where GCP differentiates itself and where they can really get something extra. So Cloud SQL is something that they've looked at. It's the managed database, setting up class databases, something that would be easier with this. The NoSQL offerings for Google Cloud are actually also pretty exciting. In general, our classes are SQL-based, but being able to spin up a NoSQL server and show what a key value data store looks like or what a big table data store looks like without having to worry about the infrastructure is pretty exciting. And actually, the really exciting part, and this is really cool for me personally. I don't know, I think this is awesome, are the BigQuery public data sets. BigQuery is the web front end for SQL on Google, and there's a large number of public data sets available. These range from Hacker News comments to New York taxi cab data. And being able to give students basically free access to these large data sets that are already set up in a database and queryable is pretty big for when you're teaching a SQL class. Instead of using a toy database or having to build a database for each class, you can point those students to this and have them use it for assignments. And I think the faculty especially are very excited about being able to bring in some real world data and not just using textbook examples. So if you go to the next slide, the second case study I'm going to talk about is machine learning. I think as Stephen kind of alluded to, machine learning is the big area of computer science right now, at least for us. We've seen a huge growth both in the number of machine learning and NLP and AI and computer vision and associated classes, both in the number of classes and the enrollment. I think something like almost half of our master's students are now machine learning tracked. The problem with this is these classes have very high hardware requirements. It's not just you can do this on a laptop. It's CPU intensive, it's memory intensive, and these classes are very hungry for both GPUs and now TPUs. They also usually need the latest libraries, the latest packages, the latest frameworks. And it's actually a very high burden on us to administer all of this stuff. There's conflicts where one class may need CUDA 7, one class may want CUDA 5, some classes want this software, some classes want that Python. This was not really tenable for us to manage all of this as a department. So GCP really came to the rescue here. If you go to the next slide. So students can install what they need on their own private VM. We don't have to worry about conflicting packages. We don't have to worry about driver issues. We know that the hardware and the software is going to work together. That's actually a really big deal for us. The fact that top-end GPUs are also available is pretty big. We have now hundreds of students taking these machine learning classes, and there's just no real way for us to provide enough GPUs for them to get a chance to use this. GPUs on Google Cloud are kind of expensive still. As a rule of thumb, we think it's about $1 a minute to do real work on a GPU, or $1 an hour, I'm sorry. $1 a minute would be quite expensive. But still, with a standard coupon, that's about 50 hours of building a classifier or training, DNN, which is more than enough for a good assignment and to give students kind of an idea of what this entails. The other big benefit that we see is the scales with class size. So we don't have to plan out a year or two in advance. We don't have to make large hardware purchases. We know that as long as we can find faculty to teach the students, we'll have the computational resources to take care of them. If you go to the next slide real quick. I just want to talk really quick about what GCP looks like for a student. So we try to encourage students to have a separate project for each class. So if each class has its own coupon code, each class will have its own billing account, as Lori said, and we try to keep these separately in each projects. So if this is a typical overworked student here at Columbia, they may be taking advanced machine learning, which is going to use compute engine and is going to use the ML. They may be in a programming class that uses App Engine, and they may be in a databases class that uses PubSub, MySQL, and Bigtable. So they have access to all of these different things. They're all somewhat siloed. And if you go to the next slide, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we've learned and best practices, both for students and for faculty and TAs who are setting up these classes. The biggest thing is to start planning early and to get faculty and TAs familiar with GCP. We try to hand out faculty codes at least 2 or 3 weeks before the class starts, and we very strongly recommend that both faculty and TAs run through all the assignments as soon as possible to work out any kinks. Oftentimes there's little gotchas, like a different version of Python is installed or a different library needs, or some package needs to be installed. We want to make sure that stuff is clear as early on as possible. Kind of dovetailing with that is to document everything that students need to do. We usually have classes provide a 1 or 2 page quick start guide in addition to the guides that the department provides. Also, kind of with that is Google has amazing documentation. They have tutorials and quick starts, how-to guides, all this stuff we try to provide to students so they can kind of teach themselves as well. We're really getting out ahead of the curve and making sure that it's clear what's expected and what needs to be done. And just figuring out what works kind of best for your classes and what you can get out of Google Cloud. If you go to the next slide. So the other thing is storage is cheap. Don't skimp on disk space. And this sounds kind of obvious, but we've had quite a few students who were worried about not having enough credit. And so they tried to install on the smallest disk possible, thinking they'd save a few pennies. It turns out it's not at all worth it. when it's a week left in the semester and you realize you have a 15 gigabyte data set and it can't fit on your 10 gigabyte drive, it's a lot easier to kind of make sure you have enough space to begin with than it is to try to figure out how to resize your boot disk with a deadline staring down at you. We have some classes that use one class server, so be very careful when you do this. It can be a really good, and I'll talk real briefly about one class that did this, which was a security architecture class. The final assignment for this class was there was a central class server and had a program running, and you had to exfiltrate some data on that server. So you had to hack this program that was running and find the secret passphrase, which was a really cool assignment. And it was actually in the class at the time, and it was kind of a fun way to finish off the class. The problem was that this happened right around the time the Dirty Cow exploit came out for Linux. And if you're not familiar with it, this was a exploit that would allow an arbitrary user to assume root control. We had a student try to do this and unfortunately didn't pull it off quite right and ended up overwriting the kernel of the class server, which crashed the class server 6 hours before the assignment was due. We ended up, taking care of that and getting the assignment in, but it was a little bit touch and go for a minute. So separate out student data. Make sure if students are logging into a central server, have the student data on a separate persistent disk. In general, for students and for faculty, back up early and back up often. There's a very easy, very kind of intuitive snapshotting feature on Google Cloud instances. So take advantage of that. The cost is so minimal that there's no reason not to do this, and it will save a lot of headaches. And also just look around, make sure that you make use of everything Google has to offer. As Stephen said, they have dozens and dozens of different products, and we're really just starting to explore a lot of these. I talked a little bit about public data sets. There's pre-trained ML models that Stephen touched on. There's really just quite a bit that's available, and I think we're looking forward to working with Google for the next few years. So I think Lori has some other best practices.
Sure, we have a pricing calculator that's available. So if you're sitting there going, no, my students need more than $50 worth, here's a place to find it out. In fact, last March, we just announced a massive change to our free offerings. So you can run our smallest VM 24/7 at no cost. So you can have students have a VM that's always on when they go to use it. Starting a VM takes less than a minute, though, if you have something larger or you want to start teaching them good cloud practices. We have a console where you'll do, you have your options on how you do your work. You can work from our GUI, which is a console, and you can do everything from there. You can also work from a command line that I know some professors who think command lines are great because you can just send that information in email or write it in an assignment very quickly. Additionally, you can download materials to your own machines and work from there, but then you run into the problem of students not downloading correctly and working with a lot of different environments. Since we've had our command line available, it really makes sense to do everything there. And we're moving all of our tutorials to use our internal command line rather than an external one. Certainly you can ask for more credits if your students use more than $50. We have instructions on how you can set up budgets. And again, in addition to teaching course material, this is teaching them to be good cloud citizens. And I would wager many of you can guess that my husband is a CTO who constantly is talking about being good users of the cloud and how he'd hire somebody if they knew these kind of things. We have a lot of documentation that this is what my team uses. The last number I heard was there's 8,500 pages of documentation. And along with the basic documentation, we provide for you full programs that you'll see a little snippet of code there. And all of the code also is backed by a full program that's out on GitHub. So you can say, well, this snippet of code didn't work for me. Let's see what it really looks like and go see it in a full program. We go to the next slide, please. Other resources that we have available to you. There's a lot of training that Dan mentioned, our code labs and our quick labs. Code labs, probably over 100 labs on how to do things from as simple as setting up a VM to actually, in about 5 minutes, setting up a worldwide network where you put virtual machines in our data centers in Europe, Asia, and East and West coasts of the US. And that's all automated for you, and just, I think, would make teaching networking a lot more fun. Quick Labs was recently purchased by Google, and the idea is you don't even need to have an account to use Quick Labs. Right now, I guess the program's successful because we're seeing that there are some people who are exploiting Quick Labs. If you decide you want to try this out for your class, get in touch with well, not Dan, but get in touch with somebody at Google, and we'll be glad to send you codes to use in your class. We have a certification program. So if you're at a school, I come from Mercer University that almost none of you have heard of. We're an hour south of Georgia Tech. My students needed to compete with Georgia Tech graduates. If they could walk into jobs, and this was before we did GCP certification, and say, we have certification in this. It's not that I just did a little bit of GCP in a class, but I'm actually certified. Our certification classes are all going to be available on Coursera. And it's not just in network administration type stuff. We're also looking to have a machine learning certification. We have some classes on Udacity as well, and there's in-console tutorials. I meet regularly with our certification and training people. They want to make these courses available to you and your students for free. We know that you are the future. We talked about the documentation on cloud.google.com. Additionally, we set up in March cloud.google.com/community, where anybody who writes a tutorial that isn't covered by what we have, that deals with Google Cloud Platform, can post that tutorial to be shared with the world. So it's a community source site. And I know that if I had published stuff to here, it wouldn't have counted as much as a refereed publication, but it certainly would have impressed my department head. Additionally, we have an online community for grant recipients. It's going to be changing format. You can see the image over on this slide. We're changing formats in the next month or so, so it will be much easier for you to post materials there and to search through all the materials that have been posted. Right now, it's just a Google Plus community. Okay, for more things that you can get from GCP, there is access to Google GPUs. You do need to have each project request them, but the requests, and Dan will yell right now if I'm wrong, typically come through in about a day. So you can increase quotas. That's possible to do. TPUs aren't available yet. They will be coming as part of our cloud machine learning engine. There is a TPU research site. So if you're a researcher who wants to use TPUs, we'll include the link to that site. I think that is already in the notes. Our pre-trained APIs are exciting. As I said, I'm retired, which means I've been doing this a long time. When I started, people did not have computers, which may shock some of you. So the ability to have a program read a bunch of numbers and automatically figure out their mean and their mode and standard deviation was really exciting. That's not really exciting to students any longer. So we have, along with the 4 that Stephen talked about earlier, a new pre-trained machine learning API that will go through and will analyze videos for you. And I've written, actually this is out at our community site, I've written instructions on how, if instead of averaging numbers, you want your Java class to go make an HTTP call, to use the image processing, you know, within a beginning Java class toward the end, or a second semester class, they can actually go out, make the calls, and get back an analysis of what's in that image or what's in that video. Or they can actually do translation in the class. All of these require Google Cloud Platform because there's a charge for them after you've used it about 1,000 times. And so just having the key and learning how to set up with keys is interesting. I hope none of the people listening to this are in this situation, but what touched me most about the program was when I talked to faculty members who would tell me, we have no Linux machines on campus, and we're trying to prepare students to go out in the job market. They now have access to Linux machines. They can also, if they're teaching an system administration class, work with real machines. I would never have had my students do serious Linux administration on real hardware, because you know they're going to wipe things out. Well, Dan's class did that. They're going to wipe things out. Here, you can wipe it out, close it down, and restart the operating system in about 2 minutes. You can actually have networks with machines in different locations. And we're doing a big push on our public data sets. In fact, we're running a one-day workshop in the building next door on all of the different public data sets we have, that there's real data for students to work with. That I worked with Access's sample database in my database classes, where there'd be about 15 records. And there's no need, if there's 15 records, to actually do database. But if you give them 15 million records, students start to appreciate what's going on. Next slide.
Excellent. For the next slide, we're actually towards the end, so we have time to save for comments.
Great.
But I did want to mention that we have another webinar coming up on Thursday, July 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern on high performance computing and how you can integrate HPC centers with Google Cloud Platform. So thinking about some of the common integrations like Condor. And we're doing this with Fermilab and a few others right now. In fact, we just had an MIT researcher working on some mathematical analysis on ellipses who bursted a couple weeks ago 580,000 cores one weekend into the Google Cloud using our preemptible VMs, which is VMs that we could preempt within 24 hours or about 24-hour jobs, but you get an 80% discount. So he did about 580,000 cores, which he had set the previous record, which was around 220,000. So we doubled it, more than doubled. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about how we can help with high performance computing from Google Cloud Platform. And if you're interested, there's the registration link. It is case sensitive. So, and we'll also put the registration link at the end of the notes doc. So with that, we'll go into some questions. Here is the shared doc that we have. It is case sensitive. I'm in it and I already see there's some questions. So I'm going to start passing them. We have a few of your questions as well from your registration. So I'll start up at the top. Paula asks about teaching courses in project management and process analyses. And so whether it makes sense to use Google Cloud Platform. And then she had mentioned that as she was listening to your part, Dan, might make sense to work with computer networking instructor on a joint project. But any suggestions that either of you have on different ways you think Google Cloud Platform could help around project management and process analyses classes?
Yeah, so our IEOR department, which is Industrial Engineering and Operations Research, which includes project management, process analysis, actually makes quite extensive use of Google Cloud. I think 90% of the classes in the department now use Google Cloud Platform. So it's definitely something that can be done. I don't know specifically with your course, but I think it's actually a really cool idea as well to work with kind of cross-discipline stuff in terms of working with a networking course. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly done. There's a lot of support for it. We've had a lot of success.
Great. Excellent. Kyle asks, is there a way to automatically start and stop machines at certain times of the day or days of the week? Either of you know the answer to that?
No, that's a great question. We have a lot of automation for setup. I don't know if we have the start and stop working. Have you tried it, Dan?
Yeah, I don't think there's a start and stop, at least through the cloud platform. You can certainly do it through the SDK, which is the command line that Laura was talking about. You could just set up a cron job to start and stop, because I think Laura touched on this, but yeah, there's different ways to access Google Cloud Platform, and depending on what you or your students want to do. And we have some that only use the web interface, which is much easier. And we have others that prefer using the command line SDK. And anything you can do in one, you can do in the other. So it's 100% possible to start and stop from the command line, and then from there just set up an automatic job.
Excellent, great. Next question is it easy for students to clone a VM?
Yes and no.
I saw you laughing, so I figured it was a nuanced answer.
Yeah, this is something we've been like trying to figure out the best way to do and best practices for over a year now. I don't think we've settled on one best way. It really depends what you're trying to do. So one thing you can do is take a standard VM from like VMware, like a VMDK file, provide that to your students. They can then use that to clone a standard. So for instance, if you're asking because you want to have a standard VM that every student has a copy of, then yeah, you can provide either one that's created on Google Cloud or one that's created locally and then uploaded to the cloud. Whether or not that's easy is, some classes have felt this is perfectly normal, and some classes think this is a little too hard and it's much easier to just give instructions on how to set up a VM. The other thing, which isn't quite cloning in terms of data, but is in terms of setup, is you can provide setup scripts, which is a script that's run once when you build a new VM. And if all you're doing is ensuring that a set list of packages are installed or a set list of settings are set originally, then you can provide that to everybody. It's small enough you can send it in an email or provide it on the class website, and that will get run once and kind of standardize the setup. So we've had classes do both. Again, I don't know whether I would call it easy. I don't think anybody's been 100% happy with any of these solutions, but it's certainly doable.
That's good feedback. Excellent. Thank you. I've been taking notes in our shared doc as well while you guys have been mentioning. The next one, probably more towards you, Lori, is do I have to apply for, and this is from Anwar, do I have to apply for education grants every semester? And then what will happen to student VMs at the end of the semester?
Student accounts stay, and their billing account is good for a year after they start, or after the start date of the class. So if you have students who have VMs and they've shut them down and they're not running up any charges, they sit there, and they're going to be there for a long time. Storage, because we don't charge for VMs that are just sitting idle. Storage, after about 30 days, if you take away billing from them, will be removed. Yes, you do need to reapply every semester. This helps us with our record keeping. There are lots of people who are very interested in this program and want to see success. And this way we can say, yes, we've had this professor use it for 3 semesters in a row. It also helps us find out who's using the project. So we do ask that you reapply. I know Dan says that it's great if you can convince students to have a different billing account for each project, for each class. If you have one student who is in 3 classes and funds all 3 projects with the first account, and then when that runs out, he changes it over to the second account, we're not going to know the difference. Dan may want to argue why his way makes more sense, but if it's simpler for the student, you're okay with that?
I was going to say, I think our way is kind of the ideal way. I think your way is probably what ends up happening 90% of the time.
Yeah, and actually what we've seen very often is classes where the students, there is no student version of the console. So when you start up the console, we strongly encourage you to sign up for the free trial program. And many students do that, and we never see any usage from their class. That I've had professors who have sworn to me that they use it every day, and the total spent by the whole class is $35. And it's like, well, but they were using the free trial, and they were using the free tier, and they were using App Engine, which has a very generous free project limit. So yeah, students will do things, and most of you are faculty, so I assume you know that.
Excellent. Next question is from Jiang, and it's, my students and I used GCP last semester in a database course, planning to use GCP in other courses as well. The question is, do students need to redeem different coupons for different courses? I think you were touching on this in the last answer. Since the coupon is applied under one course name, what happens when the 1-year time frame expires after the coupon is redeemed?
Gosh, we haven't had the 1-year time frame expire. since the program's a year old today. I assume that the billing account will expire and will no longer be usable. What will happen then is if students have another billing account from another class, they'll transfer the billing account on those particular projects over to the new billing account. So if you have a student who's still using the account from last fall on projects this fall, until that 1-year time frame comes up, they won't need another coupon. But we'd strongly encourage you to get it for them anyway, so when they reach this point. The coupon system is part of what distinguishes us from some of the other projects that some of the other cloud providers, that they will give you a fixed amount per student. And if a student is taking 10 classes, then they get 10 coupons. That's fine with us. And they can do it over multiple years as well.
Excellent. From Joshua, is it possible to obtain additional information about access to Quick Labs?
Sure, Joshua. What happens is if you go to Quick Labs, you can read through any of the labs there. What sets it apart is that you can also start up a lab and it will spin up an entire Gmail or a Google account and start a new platform. So it takes a little longer to start the code labs through Quick Labs, but they aren't spending any money. Additionally, they'll expire. But if you want to try this out, if you say are running a faculty workshop and want faculty to see this without having to set up accounts, get in touch with me, you know me, and we'll send you some tokens that when you start a lab, you need to provide a token still. If you want, I can see if I can get that up and running right now.
Excellent. That's good service. Next question from Christian. Can you give some examples of how student projects using GCP are being tested or evaluated by the professor or TA? And Dan, you might have more knowledge on this than we do.
Sure. So it depends completely on the class. For classes that use GCP, there's just kind of a standard platform. Students will submit code like they normally would, either through like a Git repository or through just through our course software. For other classes, like for instance, our databases classes, where one of the assignments is to create a database backend and a web frontend, the faculty or the TAs, when they grade it, will actually be able to go to that website. All VM instances on Google Cloud have external IP addresses, and there are not default open on port 80, but you can open them up on port 80, so you can open them up for web traffic. And in the case of Google Cloud for databases, students have to have their database web page running. Faculty will be able to go on, access the database, run a few queries, do whatever they want to and evaluate it that way. Before we used cloud, students would actually have to take their laptop in. Their database would be running on their laptop. They'd have to log the TA in and have the TA grade that way. So this is a little bit easier for everybody involved, I think.
That does sound a lot easier.
Yes.
Excellent. Another question from Matt. Can I apply my $100 credits to send more than 50 email per day limit from AppScript? He uses AppScript to email feedback to his students and for large classes. I don't know if we know the answer to that, so we can look into it.
I don't have an answer. We'll look into it. I know there's been a lot of discussion going on internally about that.
Excellent. And I saw you left your address there, Matt, so we can get back to you. Perfect. There are a few other questions that came in too when you all were registering. One was just around tips for minimizing the dollars spent. Any that I know you mentioned a few, Dan, when you were presenting, but any that are top of mind of how to minimize the money that you're spending on the grants?
So the big one is shut your VMs down when you're not using them. One question we actually get a lot is what happens when we shut the VM down? Does it persist? Do we get it back? And yeah, if you shut a VM down, as Laura mentioned, you don't get charged for anything, for any usage. When you bring the VM back up again, you get charged again, but all your data is there, your disk is there, everything is like normal. It's just like turning off a computer. So that's the big deal. The other thing I want to say is we've rarely had people run out of credit. I think maybe a dozen times in the 1,800 plus credit codes that we've sent out to students. It just doesn't happen. Google Cloud is really stupidly inexpensive. People vastly kind of overestimate how much it's going to cost to do even a semester's worth of work. And it's just really never been an issue for us. I think maybe 1 or 2 cases of students accidentally leaving their VM on the whole semester. And by the end, it's running out. But even then, that doesn't really happen. So I don't know. I mean, I wish I could give a better answer other than it hasn't been an issue.
Excellent. And for those that do, there are a couple of questions around handling situations if a student runs over their allocated budget or within the first week accidentally uses their credits. Definitely, as Lori mentioned, reach back out to us, get you some more funds if it's a mistake or maybe even better if they're actually using this so heavily that they need more credit. We would love that. So feel free to reach back out to us. Question was around, can we use GCP like a local server? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, we've had classes that do that. As I mentioned, the security class made use of it as if you're talking about local server, like a central class server, we've definitely had classes do that. I don't know if Lori has other examples.
No, I haven't been able to teach with this yet.
Oh.
We'll have to fix that. Someone on the line, bring Lori in as a visitor. Maybe she'll get you some quick lab credits, some tokens. All right, the next question, which I think you might have answered before, Dan, was just around managing and viewing each student's submissions of work. It sounds like you guys use GitHub or different repositories that you build, but so we can skip that one. Is there...
If I can just say, I come from a much smaller school than Dan. And you can also have students make you owners of the project. So you can go in and see all of the details of the project and make sure that they've done everything that you expect them to.
Excellent. And that's in the project, similar to like adding someone to a Google Doc, you can add on collaborators to a Google project, right, Lori?
Right, yeah.
Great. Another question, this is actually more about G Suite. It seems like G Suite is our productivity suite, software as a service, where it has Google Docs, speaking of, and Gmail and Calendar. There was a question on the availability of Google Business Suite products tied to a Google grant, like file shares, email, etc. So we do give G Suite for Education for free to not-for-profit educational institutions. So universities definitely qualify. And that gives you access to Gmail, Calendar, Drive, etc. So all the email file shares. Typically, we see that it's the central IT that signs up because you need to own the domain name. We ask that you upload a CNAME record or a text file to actually confirm that you own it. But you could, let's say your whole campus isn't deploying G Suite, but maybe just your CS department. You could, for example, ask them to create a specific subdomain like cs.university.edu and register that for G Suite for Education. So provided that you have that EDU address and you own the DNS records or another person that does and can verify domain ownership, you should likely qualify for our G Suite for Education. And that is free, unlimited number of users. There's a question too, if you've submitted a request for credits and hadn't heard anything, do we have any ETAs, Lori, that you would recommend around how often, what the timeline is for turning around on credit requests?
We've been doing fairly well. I'd suggest that you check for mail from cloud-edu-grants at gmail.com or at google.com. If we have questions about your application, we'll come back to you, but or send, and we need to include this in our links, cloud-edu-grants at google.com. Send us a reminder.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of cases where people have misentered their email addresses, and that's caused a lot of trouble.
Gotcha. Okay. There's another question on how to get credits for projects with students that are not for a course. Currently, the program is limited to courses with syllabus. Part of this is for fraud reasons, to make sure that we are actually providing these for qualified courses with a syllabus. So that is that we do ask that that's part of the application process. But during that flow that we showed you early on, we took a screenshot of the application. You can view that as well online to see exactly what you need in order to apply. All right. There was a question on any plans for a collaborative document repository. So instruction guides to enhance better the tutorials, etc. I think you were mentioning that on the community site, Lori, but if you want to touch upon that, that would be great.
The community site is for publishing your own tutorials. But yes, we're going to be moving to right now the Google Plus group is our only way to do a collaborative group, and there's no way to organize things. We're going to be moving to something next month, I've been promised. So I'm really looking forward to it. But yes, there are definitely plans.
Great. Excellent. A really good question here on how can classes easily use Jupyter notebooks, data lab, et cetera, to do a notebook at the same time? So Lori or Dan, could you talk about data labs?
I know you've looked into this, Dan.
Yeah, so the way we did it was we actually had one centralized class server, and that goes a little bit beyond the scope of the $100 credits that the faculty get for this class. The short answer is that you need quite a bit of horsepower to run a sizable, depends on the size of your class, but I think the class that looked into using it at Columbia had 50 to 80 students, each with their own notebook and a central Jupyter Hub server. And that's another case of if you do that, be sure you have more than enough disk space because you don't have to deal with expanding that disk. But yeah, we've done it on the cloud here. But again, you may have to talk to Lori or Stephen about getting credit for that because it's definitely beyond the scope of a $50 or $100 credit.
But that's certainly one of the reasons that you can request more than the normal allotment.
Gotcha. Another question on Spanner. Dan, do you happen to know anyone using Spanner in any of your classes, or Laura, if you could mention, heard of any examples?
I don't think we know anybody yet here using it.
Yes, Spanner's usually for really big projects, and we haven't seen them yet.
Excellent. I heard, and you could actually probably correct me if I'm wrong, both of you, but I heard that Spanner is, it can tell the time sometimes even more precisely than like the atomic clocks. It's so good at relational databases. So I know we use it really heavily at Google. Laura, you touched briefly upon this, but could you just draw the difference between the free $300 GCP credits that people can get when they first sign up their account versus the credits that are offered through the Google Cloud Platform Education Grants Program?
The two big differences are credit card. To sign up for the free trial, you need to have a credit card. And oversight, that we have the ability to see how much usage each of your students has used in the $50, whereas we don't have any ties with the free trial program. Additionally, students can, both of these coupons expire after a year, and they can't get a second free trial in the second year. So if you have them start as freshmen using the free trial, that's great. And in fact, I had a professor who said, oh, I just have my students use the free trial. It's easier. They get more money. It's fine. He didn't care about the credit card. I said, well, what about when they need it in class a year from now? He's like, they're not going to be in my class. I don't care. But with the $50, with our credits, they can get that for, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year on into grad school. So they can reuse these, they can reapply for these credits or reapply these credits to their account. And we also have the ability to look over their shoulder and tell you that, Chris Smith has used $45 1 month into the semester. This is great. Do you want another coupon for Chris Smith?
Excellent. Very helpful. Thank you. There is another question. Do any of you know about a domain name registration that's free for students by chance? I think this is just a broader question, not necessarily for Google Cloud Platform, but in general, any service that offers domain registration for free for students?
I don't.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Another question, it's a little bit more specific to EDU grants, is when this program will come to Australia. So very good question. As Lori mentioned, a year ago, we rolled out in the United States. In March, we expanded to most countries in Europe and Canada. So we have about 30 countries now. We're continuing trying to increase it. As you can imagine, a lot of both legal pieces you have to go through every time you expand and operationalizing it. So it is something that we would like to do. I don't have a timeline for you yet, but definitely appreciate you reaching out because that helps us in prioritizing. So thank you. Next, support for Spark. I was looking this up. I believe that we do support Apache Spark. Notably, the easiest way to do it is through Google Cloud Dataproc, which is a managed Spark and Hadoop service. It allows you to create clusters quickly and then hand off to cluster management to the service. But have either of you used Spark at all with Google Cloud Platform?
We've had classes use Hadoop. I'm not sure if they use Spark as well. It's just it's far enough outside of my area expertise that I couldn't really speak more than that people have been using it here. So it's possible. I couldn't answer more than that.
No problem. Okay. Yeah, I definitely recommend checking out Dataproc. It might be what you're looking for. And then the last question from the registrations was, is it free to host a static website on Google Cloud Platform for web development courses? And I believe that probably has to do with how the coupons are structured. So provided you have money on the coupons of the $50 until that runs out, it would host that through that date. So we would recommend, if you're going to be doing something persistently for the end of time, you might want to sign up for, actually have a Google Cloud Platform service. It's not just dependent upon the credits.
You can have an App Engine application run for free till the end of time, or for 6 months, whatever. And you can also run our smallest VM at no charge.
Excellent.
Just to add to that, the lowest tier free VM is actually fairly hefty in terms of what it can do. We've had students run small database servers off of that, and it's enough for coursework. Certainly running a small website is completely feasible off the free tier.
Excellent. Your answers were better than mine, so I'm glad to hear that you guys chimed in, because I didn't know that was all possible. Excellent. We're at time. I think that we got through a lot of questions, by the way. Thank you all for joining, and we will have a recording of this that we can send out, and we'll keep the document at the end of it are those resources that we were talking about, as well as registration for the next webinar in case you're interested. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.